Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Dr. Skinner here. Welcome to the first class for the Administration of Computer-Based Management Information System. Today, we are going to go through Chapter 1, Managing in the Digital World. Before I start, just a couple of announcements. Just do remember that the PDF of these slides is available on Blackboard for you to download. That's the first thing. And also that during the actual class time for the administration of IS on the Wednesday, if you want to come to the class, I'm going to be there waiting for any questions that you may have. Consider that like an office hour, if you like. So even though you're watching this video at any time that you want to be, if you want to have any questions, I will always be in the class Zoom session during the classroom time that this would be going on normally. Okay, so first of all, Chapter 1, Managing in the Digital World. So managers are being confronted with new tools and challenges as digital technologies proliferate throughout the workplace. So this chapter, the very first one, is going to introduce us to something called the information age, and it's going to lay a foundation for the rest of the semester. We've got 4 learning objectives today. Let's read those together. We're going to describe the characteristics of the digital world. We're going to also talk about the contemporary societal issues of that digital world and some of the IT megatrends shaping the digital future. So we have 5 typical megatrends that we're going to look at. This is all going to kind of lead us into how did we get to where we are in a digital context? Where did we emerge from? We're also going to look at what actually is an information system. What are the component parts? Well, it's actually, I can tell you now, it's data, technology, people, and organizational components. But we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail. We're going to talk about the dual nature of information systems, where we look about when things work well and when things don't work so well. And we're going to look at some examples of modern information systems in the context of organizations. And then lastly, we're going to touch on a very, very important subject that often gets overlooked, but in my class, I really get you to focus on it a lot. And you're going to look at a lot of case studies, which deals with this concept of ethics. So what does it say? Describe how computer ethics affect the use of information systems and discuss the ethical concerns associated with information privacy and intellectual property. Okay, so the emergence of the digital world, what information systems are, we're going to describe the dual nature of information systems, and we're going to explore some of the key ethical considerations regarding the use of information systems. So our first objective, describe the characteristics of the digital world, some of the contemporary societal issues of the digital world, and IT megatrends shaping the digital future. So we start with this, the rise of the digital world, societal issues, and these megatrends. So here we are, the emergence of the digital world. Increasing global competitiveness, I can't say that word, competitiveness has forced, I'll try it again. Increasing global competitiveness has forced companies to find better ways to do things. All right, that's some of the nature of the business in the world we live in. It's global and it's very competitive. To be competitive, you've got to be faster, you've got to be better, you've got to be cheaper. And information systems plays a key role in doing all of this. You know, it's no longer just about automating processes. It's also about casual and social activities as well. We also know, for instance, that things like desktop PCs, laptops, they're unlikely to go away. These, along with newer devices to access data, are going to remain important. Okay. Computing in this context has changed actually over the last few years from an activity primarily focused on automating work to one that encompasses various social and casual activities. Okay, so we're seeing this change because there is such a proliferation of technologies everywhere. Everything from these mobile devices to iPads to laptops and so on and so forth. That bottom line on the screen is very important. The boundaries between work and leisure time are blurring. You'll see, for instance, that mobile technology is prevalent. All right, we see this in developing countries, especially where you're leaping straight from not having desktop computers to straight into mobile devices. We're actually missing out laptops. But in our world, you come to classes, you come with a laptop, and so on and so forth. But the problem is, for those of us who have access to technology, we can take advantage of the way the society is becoming. All right, we can do that. However, for those who can't, they're not able to keep up with those of us who can. And we're seeing this thing called the digital divide. Now, the digital divide basically is saying those of us who have it can, and those of us who don't have access to technology cannot. So as information technology becomes more pervasive in society, the fundamental skills necessary to access and use it are becoming essential to success in business. If you are unfortunately one of those people who are left behind, either by choice or through lack of opportunity, it's going to make it very difficult for yourself to achieve economic success. Okay. And you can see at the top there, this strong linkage between computer literacy and a person's ability to compete. If you're not literate in technology, can you compete? Technology is everything in organizations. It's the foundation on any given organization, right? Everything, all the key business component parts of the majority of the most organizations is founded on technology. If you can't be competitive, if you can't use technology, which is always changing, then you're going to get left behind. You will not be able to compete. So you see there, people in rural communities, the elderly, people with disabilities, and so on and so forth, they lag behind the rest of us and therefore cannot compete. The exception, of course, being the elderly, my mother, who's 83 and knows her way around the iPad better than I do, which is a little bit scary, given that she's 83, but she manages to FaceTime me and send me files and all sorts of stuff, including embarrassing photographs of myself when I was a teenager this morning, which wasn't what I was looking for. Anyway, so the challenge becomes, what can we do to help those who are unable to breach the digital divide? Well, we're going to talk about that later on this semester. But this digital divide is a major ethical challenge. Excuse me. So, what this actually means is that information, as in an information system, the information, therefore, has become a very valuable resource. Okay. Although having the right information at the right time has always been valuable, we can now strategically gather and manage information in ways that were never before possible. Allows us, as a result, to leverage it and create value with it in much the same way as we leverage and create value with land, with labor, and with capital. So land, labor, and capital have always been items of value in the knowledge society, right? If you own land, if you have lots of money, if you have a workforce working for you, these are valuable things. These are things of value that can give you a competitive advantage. Well, now access to knowledge and your ability to harness and manipulate knowledge is now just as important. So knowledge has become as important as, and actually many feel more important than, land, labor, and capital revenues. The thing is, we can now gather and manage value from a knowledge perspective globally. And this is because we are living in a globalized world. The past decades have seen major global changes influencing individuals, businesses, economics, and societies well into the future. Okay? And this is this thing called globalization. Globalization, the ability to do business on a global scale. So we have this digital world, which is defined by globalization. Examples of being able to do business on a global scale. We can ship wine. Did you know that Dr. Skinner is a qualified sommelier? Did you know that? I took my wine exams 3 years. I collect wine. I've been collecting wine for about 25 years. I have a pretty decent wine collection. I have about 1,000 bottles of wine in my collection. Most of it's stored in Europe. I collect French wine in Europe and I collect American wine over here. That's a tangent. One of the things you've never been taught by me before is that I go off on tangents, and I do it all the time. And then I try and retrace my steps like I'm doing now, and I get lost. So just talk amongst yourself whilst I do this. Anyway, yes, globalization. Globalization. So being able to ship wine from Australia to Europe, all right, costs only a few cents. It's very, very cheap. People can make voice or video calls around the globe for free using Skype or Google Hangouts or WhatsApp, including my mother on a Sunday morning when I'm trying to have a lion. Netflix, a streaming movie provider, Netflix, is available in almost every country. So with the decrease in communication costs, companies can now draw on a large pool of skilled professionals from all over the globe. Okay. Think about that. Think about that. We can have organizations who can leverage skilled resources in one country to benefit another country based on globalization. We live in a digital world where globalization allows us to be competitive on a global scale. So the question becomes, okay, this digital world which allows globalization, how did globalization come about? How did it occur? This concept of being able to do business, have this global market where we can all work together. And there's actually, it's very interesting, there's 5 steps, 5 historical things that happened that allowed globalization as we know it to occur. And it all began, when do you think? Have a guess, have a think amongst yourselves whilst you're listening to this. I'll give you a few seconds. There's one thing that happened. I'll give you a clue. It was in 1991 in Europe. And it was the fall of the Berlin Wall. Now, Berlin is a city in Germany. And prior to 1991, Germany was split into 2 parts, East Germany and West Germany. And East Germany was controlled by communism, by communists out of the Soviet Union. In 1991, Berlin was a city that was in East Germany, but it was actually not part of the communist control. It was actually part of the West Germany, and it was just a quirk left over from the Second World War. But anyway, essentially there was this city, Berlin, in East Germany, which had this wall built around it by the communists after the Second World War to stop people in East Germany getting into the West, and Berlin being in the West. But basically there was this thing called perestroika in Soviet Union, where communism fell. All right, so communism fell, the Berlin Wall came down, suddenly all these people in the East suddenly had access to the West. So what does that mean? Think about that from a business perspective. If you are a businessman, you're always looking for new markets. If you're a technology person, you're always wanting to get access to new markets, to share your technologies and have access to new markets, to people to buy your goods. In this case, a whole of communism crashed, and suddenly you have access to all these millions and millions and millions of people. Okay, that's the first thing. Conversely, these millions and millions and millions of people for the best part of 35 years since the Second World War had only had access to information and knowledge based on what the communist leaders of the Soviet Union fed them. And suddenly they have access to the West. They have access to democracy. They have access to freedom of information. They get to find out what the real world is all about. So that's the first thing, this fall of the Berlin Wall in 1991. The second thing happened in 1995, and I'll give you a clue. The 95 of 1995 is very important. I'll give you a few seconds to think what it might be. Yes, it was the emergence of Windows 95. Windows 95 was the first pretty much user-friendly graphical user interface created on a mainstream scale that everyone could understand and use. I still remember in 1996 when I first saw it, playing around with it and just being absolutely gobsmacked. Can't believe it's now 25 years since it came out. I still remember it, and it was just wonderful. The previous versions of Windows were not very good, not very user-friendly. They did the job as an operating system, but Windows 95, where it all began. So you have this new, easy to use, easy to understand, widely available operating system, Windows 95 becomes available. 1995 to 2000, the third thing happened, which was the dot-com bubble. So at this stage, the internet was just gone mainstream in 1995. That was one of the other ones as well. That was number 5 in my list. So the internet had come about, it was just going mainstream. And then over 1995, going up to 2000, you had all these organizations coming online on the internet and selling business. You know, this was the new marketplace, the new way to interact with everybody. And a lot of money was being spent, all right? And suddenly it all crashed. There was over investment in business. There was too much supply, not enough demand, and everything crashed. And as part of that, a load of money had been spent on telecoms. So there's a huge investment in telecoms, right? But then suddenly, of course, with the dot-com bubble, everything crashed. So what happens? If I just summarize all of it, you have all these new markets coming together. These people who'd never before had access to information. They're coming in from the East. In the West, we've suddenly got a new market, people who want to buy products that they've never had access to. We have operating system that everybody can use. It's prevalent. It's easy to understand. We have an internet, a new medium for people to interact on. We have overinvestments in telecoms. So it means that telecom prices had crashed because there's so much overinvestment, and the dot-com bubble, all these businesses have crashed. It just meant it was a perfect world for globalization to occur. Okay, so those 5 things: the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1991, the emergence of Windows 95 in 1995, the dot-com bubble between 1995 and 2000, overinvestment in telecoms in 1998, and the internet going mainstream from about 1995, 1996 onwards. All of those things coming together meant globalization was able to occur. Okay, so as you can see on the screen, we have developing countries now having established companies to reach millions of new customers. All right, this decrease in communication costs has increased this use of this thing called outsourcing. I'm going to talk about that on the next slide. Okay, it's also the other thing is that 50% of the world's population now live in cities. They want to get access to technology because there's obviously more technology investment in cities than in rural areas. And all these things is meaning that the digital world is changing on an all frequent basis. I touched on outsourcing. Outsourcing is one of these things that has arisen directly from globalization. So what do we mean by outsourcing? So outsourcing is when you take business processes currently being performed internally by your company and you have another company to do them instead. Okay. So outsourcing is typically driven by cost reduction, and it's undertaken when another company can perform a process at a lower cost than you can for yourself. It doesn't automatically imply moving work overseas. You can find another company in your own country who can do the work cheaper than you can because they're more expert at it, they have the technology to do it, and so on and so forth. But typically, you'll often see outsourcing being outsourced to another country. So the decline in telecommunication costs we talked about earlier on in the emergence of globalization has significantly reduced the expenses in moving processes to businesses that are overseas. So such overseas companies may enjoy multiple competitive advantages, such as lower labor costs. So outsourcing is a direct result of globalization, and it's all predicated on this tremendous decrease in communication costs. So what are the key reasons for outsourcing? What are the key reasons for outsourcing? We talked about reducing or controlling costs. What else do we have? To free up internal resources. So when we say free up internal resources, what it means is maybe we as an organization are not expert in technology, right? We obviously need to have technology, but maybe we can outsource part of our technology work to somebody else who is expert. And the resources that we had doing technology internally, they can be freed up now to focus on those things that are more important to our business. Alternatively, it might be to gain access to world-class capabilities. Maybe there are people in certain countries who are able to provide functionality and skills in certain areas that you can't get elsewhere. What else? To increase the revenue potential of the organization? Absolutely, we can drop the costs and thereby increase the revenue potential. Reduce time to market. Reduce time to market is actually one that you need to think a little bit about, but the beauty of it, it comes about because you can have people working in a different country when you're asleep. Okay, so let's say you outsource some coding, you outsource coding capability to a company in, let's say, India, and we're based here in the US. So you have coders working during the day here in Houston, and then once they log off for the night, the coding carries on in India, then they hand back to you, and so on and so forth. So you essentially have coding going on 24/7 if you really want to. What does that mean? That you're going to have the work completed quicker than your competitors, and therefore you're going to get first move to market advantages. What else? I'm just thinking some examples: increase process efficiencies, to be able to focus on core activities, kind of ties up to freeing up internal resources above, and to compensate for a lack of specific capabilities or skills, which kind of ties into that as well. You can also get benefits from economies of scale. So that would include things like, if you outsource to a company that is specializing in being outsourced to, they have the skills to do what you need to do because they do it for other companies as well, and therefore you're going to get very good quality service. Okay. So in addition to the help informations give to outsourcing other business processes, information system processes are also subject to outsourcing themselves. So information systems outsourcing is done for the same reasons as other business processes. The prime driver for information systems outsourcing is also cost reduction, just like for other types of outsourcing. Other drivers include outsourcing to more effective companies, allowing a business to focus on its core business activities as well. Have a think yourself if you've ever been exposed to outsourcing. I've outsourced technology roles in my experience in my company. When I worked back in the bank, we outsourced some projects to companies in India because they were cheaper and they were able to work when we weren't working ourselves. The thing to think, right, all these benefits are great, but what about the challenges? Are there any challenges, do you think, to working in a digital world that we need to think about? It's always great to have the good things, but there are also bad things as well. I'm going to come back to those other two slides which I've just jumped over in a minute. Okay, so here are some of the challenges of operating in the digital world. So there are new challenges as well as new opportunities. In addition to the expected challenges of, for instance, culture, or varying working demographics and political instability, there are additional challenges as different countries pass varying information system regulatory controls affecting things like privacy, standards, information ownership, and information censorship. So for instance, cultural differences on the idea of privacy or ownership of information or censorship. You can see straight away that one country may have very different views about what is private from a data perspective compared to another country. Okay, so yeah, you have to be very careful about where and how and why you outsource. Would you outsource to a technology company, for instance, at the moment in Syria? No, you wouldn't, because it's a very unstable country. There's lots of fighting going on, and we don't know what's going on. Would you outsource to a country in North Korea? Probably not, because the laws, standards, and individual freedoms do not sit comfortably with those of the USA. And so on and so forth. Culturally, I've got an example of a cultural one which I actually had to deal with, and it was very interesting. I'm going to share that with you. One of the things that when I was working in banking, I was a senior technology project manager. You probably saw that on the first day when I was telling you a little bit about myself. One of the decisions I made was I needed to outsource a load of projects to India. And we had a relationship with a company now where were they? I think it was in Chennai, down in Southeast India. And we outsourced a load of project work. So these guys are going to be working on building this new technology for us at Bank of America. And It was all great. So we reached out to them and said, can you do this project? Yes, sir, we can do that. No problems. Fantastic. You all understand it? Yes. You have all the skills and the workforce. Yes, no problems. And you'll be able to hit your project delivery on time, on budget, and on quality. Yeah, no problem whatsoever. Great. Away we go. And straight away we had problems. Now, one of the things you'll get taught in the technology project class, and we'll talk about it, I talk about it in SAD as well actually, is the worst thing you can have from a project management perspective is not knowing what the status is. Yeah. The best status to have is that yes, everything's great. The next best status to have is that no, things are not great, there is a problem. And the reason why that's the next best status to have is that you know there's a problem and you can start working on it, okay, and address what the problem is. The worst state to be in is when you don't know there's a problem and you don't know that that problem needs to be fixed. All right, and that's what was happening when I outsourced to this company in India. And the reason being was that they weren't telling us there was any problems. So every time we'd contact them and say, how's things going? What's the status of the project? All going great, fantastic. Any problems? No problems. You all happy, all good? Everybody on top? Yes, everything's fine. And so we went, okay, great. And we'd ask for reports and they would show everything was on reports. And essentially over time, we realized that there were fundamental problems. And it was because in this culture, for this company, they could not say no to a Western organization. They had always to say, yes, everything was great. And as a result, we didn't realize the severity of the problems they were in. And it wasn't until this project was going south at a rate of knots that I actually sent one of my team out there that we realized that this was a cultural difference. Okay. And so there was learning on both sides. So from our perspective, we had to understand that this is a cultural thing. You don't say no and things are going badly in this culture. And so we had to teach them that saying the right status was a good thing and not a bad thing. And so we both learned about each other's cultures. And after that, everything was great. And there was no punishment or anything. It was just a question of we didn't have that prior understanding, and afterwards we were able to resolve it. And after that, everything went great. So we just have to be aware that globalization does give us benefits, but there are challenges there to be overcome as well. I just want to kind of go back to these two screens, just talking about outsourcing. So this thing is the A.T. Kearney Global Services Location Index. As we can see, this is a ranking of the countries that are outsourced to. And at the top, you're probably not surprised to see India, China, Malaysia, Indonesia, and so on and so forth. Let's see where the USA is, down at 22. Where's the United Kingdom? Oh, there we go, 19. Jolly good show. Excellent. So there are three things that a country is measured on from an outsourcing perspective. It's financial attractiveness, the people skills and availability, and the business environment. So you can see there, for instance, that, for instance, Sri Lanka, number 11, is more financially attractive than India, but the people skills and availability in India are outstanding. All right, there's lots of them and there's a huge population to choose from, and the business environment's pretty good as well. Okay, very good. I just want to point out that the business environment in the United Kingdom at 2.12 is superior to that of the United States. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you. Right, so if we break down these three areas of outsourcing, financial attractiveness, people skills and availability, and business environment, what are we actually looking at? You can see them here on the left-hand side. Compensation costs, so average annual wages, different compensation costs for different positions. Infrastructure costs. What is the cost of occupancy, electricity, telecommunications? Travel costs to and fro. Tax and regulatory costs. Obviously, if I'm outsourcing, I don't want to be hit by a big tax. And you see these things like, now who was it? Is it Amazon or was it Google who've outsourced to Ireland and have no tax whatsoever? And then things like cost of corruption, exchange rate, and so on and so forth. So that's financial attractiveness. How financially attractive is a company based on compensation costs, infrastructure costs, and tax and regulatory costs. We then have people skills and availability. So the cumulative services experience and skills, labor force availability, language capabilities. Now, one of the things about being lucky enough to be British is that and I have to apologize for this. I mean, I'm going off on a tangent again, aren't I? The sun never set on the British Empire. I think there's only 17 countries in the entire world that the UK has never invaded. And I feel I have to apologize. I know I wasn't a part of that, and it was before my time. But the outcome of all that is that English, is the language of business. You know, we speak it here in America, the language of business, unless you're French, of course, and you refuse to accept that, and that's fine. But we know that France will never be as good as England, and therefore they'll have to. Yeah, anyway, so language capabilities, scores on standardized education and language tests, we always expect international students to do English tests because English is a language to speak. Jolly good show. Business environment. That was a bit of a tangent, wasn't it? Let me get back to this business environment. Country risk. So is it politically risky? Is it easy to put in foreign investment? Is it safe to do so? Is it easy to do business there? Cultural adaptability. How culturally adaptable are the countries involved from being outsourced from to being outsourced to? What's the quality of the infrastructure overall, telecoms, electricity, and so on and so forth, and how secure is intellectual property? So you put it all together, and then you can understand why these countries have these ratings. So going on. So we know the challenges of operating in the digital world. Moving on. So in this environment, we can see that there are lots of trends that are driving our digital environment, right? And there are 5 mega trends that shape it, okay? So this current confluence of emerging technologies, social events has created these 5 significant trends that business managers, such as yourselves will need to manage and understand if they don't want to be left behind. If you want to be competitive, you've got to understand how these 5 things can help you. So we have mobile devices, social media, the Internet of Things, cloud computing, and big data. Let's explore each of these individually in the next 5 slides, beginning with mobile devices. Okay. So one of the biggest trends we see today is a move towards mobile devices. So in developing nations, the vast majority of adults have mobile phones, cell phones. In the developing world, mobile devices are frequently seen leapfrogging traditional PCs, and that's what I touched on at the beginning of the class. This can lead to both opportunities and challenges, both for managers and marketers. And these things could be, for instance, that employees can conduct business almost anytime, anywhere. What is that? That's amazing, isn't it? In the old days, when you were stuck at a desk, you could only work at your desk from the time you got into your office to the time you got home, all right? So it's the time you left to go home. Now, doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing, what time of day, you can be theoretically contactable. In the old days, I used to have to fly from London to New York on business every month, right? I had to report to a boss in New York, who I hated, by the way, but I had to report to him, and I had to fly from New York. And for the journey from London to New York, it's not too bad. It's about, in those days, about 6.5, 7 hours maybe. Oh, and it was great. Back in those days, in the 20s, I was very low. I was just like a junior technical engineer. I was a Unix engineer building these big servers. And I had to go across that. And I remember going across. It didn't matter what, how senior you were in the bank, you always flew first class. I'm going off a tangent again. And I had a car pick me up from my bank, and it was a limo, and they drove me to the airport, and they checked me through customs from the back of the car. They even took my luggage out of the boot and went into the lounge and had a haircut. They had a putting green. I remember that. I had a putting green. So I played some golf in the lounge and probably drank too much champagne. Got on the flight, first class. I had a bar. And they had in-flight massages. And then I landed in New York, and I had a stretch limo to take me to the hotel just off Wall Street, where I'd be kind of going in to see my boss. It was wonderful. Oh, it was good. And what was great was that during that journey to and from, they couldn't get hold of me. I was up in the air, right? They couldn't get hold of you. It's not the case anymore. You know, nowadays they can get hold of you. It doesn't matter where you are, what altitude, and so on and so forth. So that was the first thing. What else? So employees can conduct business almost time anywhere and almost any time anywhere. Customers have their phone with them 24/7. So you can reach out to customers throughout the day, wherever they may be. Great. You can start managing that relationship more deeply than ever before. What does that mean? Well, this means we're starting to see this concept of consumerization of IT. What do we mean by consumerization of IT? It's this cycle of information technology emerging in the consumer market, then spreading to business and government organizations because employees are using the popular consumer market devices at home and then introducing them into the workplace. Okay, so for instance, social media, the use of social media for business, for reaching out to determining, finding new customers is an example of consumerization IT. Okay, bring your own device to work. When you bring your own device, you all have your own laptops, you bring it to work. You've just imagined that our class is an organization, you have your own technology. Well, that's great, right? It reduces the technology costs from the organization, but can you guarantee that you're not introducing viruses into an organization? If I'm the security manager of the organization, I'd be petrified, all right? It's not great. So bring your own device is something that you see more and more, and it's a concern, but it's becoming more and more prevalent. And this in turn, as I said, leads to security issues. Managers need to deal with employees' preferences of bringing your own device to work. The next one, mobile devices, is social media. So the rise of social media is largely based on the network effect. And this refers to the notion that the value of a network increases with the number of other users. So for example, Facebook. Facebook users share status updates or pictures with family or friends. Okay, Facebook, it says 4.6 billion. I think that's wrong. I think it's more like 2.6 billion. They share their status and updates. So the value of that network is huge. Users using apps such as Snapchat, Twitter, WhatsApp to communicate. Absolutely. A certain gentleman who resides in a certain big white house in Washington uses social media amazingly well, irrespective of what you think of his politics. All right, I'm not going to talk about politics in this class. I'm interested in information technology. His use of technology to reach out and interact with the widest number of potential customers, i.e. potential people who are going to vote for him in the election, is excellent. It's superb. I can remember seeing back in the day before they took the video down on YouTube, I saw, now who was it? It was the Taliban, I think, were using YouTube to share how to clean an AK-47 and sharing that with other members of the Taliban dispersed throughout Afghanistan and all that area. Now, if you think about the Taliban as an organization, just go with it for a second, they're using social media to reach out to members of their organization to disseminate data that is going to be of value. I know it's Taliban and how to clean AK-47, and that may, again, not sit comfortably with you, but think about it purely from a data and a technology perspective. How clever, how effective is that? Companies also use the power of the crowd to participate in innovation and product designs. Yeah. So for instance, you might want to open up, let's say I'm a company and I make widgets, and you know that there's a group on Facebook and social media that love widgets, and they talk about widgets and they collect widgets and their life is all about widgets. How about if you opened up a tiny corner of your company and reached out to these people who they love widgets, and you say, guys, girls, do you want to be involved in innovating, designing new widget designs? You can use social media as a platform to do so. And then this last thing, using social media to encourage employee collaboration. And we see that here, even at U of H. We use social media. We, as a faculty advisor in MISO, we use Facebook and Twitter and so on and so forth to encourage employee collaboration, well, not employee, but member collaboration, to step up and become more of an active member. We're going to talk about social media in chapter 5 later on in the semester, but it's very important that we recognize the importance of social media as a megatrend. The next one is the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things is this concept, it's a network whereby you can automatically share data over the internet. So with the ability to connect things such as sensors, meters, signals, motors, actuators or cameras, the potential for gathering useful data is limitless. So I think about my house, right? I'm recording this at my house. What have I got in my house? So I've got thermostats in my downstairs and upstairs. I'm just trying to see what is the type of Ecobee. I have Ecobee thermostats. All right. I have, what else do I have? I have Raccio watering system, so I can control my watering system in my yard. I have a Ring front doorbell. I have Philips Hue lights. Yeah. I have Alexa. I have Nest cameras. I'm actually gone a bit overboard, haven't I? Can I tell you a lovely story? All right. If you ever get introduced to my wife, and you never know, you may do, she comes along to miss those things occasionally. If you ever get introduced to my wife, I'm going off on another tangent here, you must promise never to tell her what I'm about to tell you. Okay, so I use the Internet of Things to save my butt when I'm being lazy. Okay, so there's an application that you can download. I have an iPhone. I guess you can do it for other types of phone, but there's an application called IFTTT, which is short for if this, then that. And essentially, IFTTT allows you to use Internet of Things applications in a way that they were not designed for. Okay, so I downloaded IFTTT and I have it on my phone. I also have installed it secretly on my wife's phone. Okay, and what it has a proximity sensor built into it. Okay, so it can tell you at any time where a phone is that has it installed. And I've configured the IFTTT on my wife's phone so that when she gets within 500 yards of my house, when she's coming home from work, I have about 12 Philips Hue light bulbs. You know, the ones where you can change color from your phone? I have about 12 of those throughout my house. And so when she gets within 500 yards of my house, they all flash pink. They do 3 flashes. So if I'm at home and I've got a beer going and I go, oh, the Astros are on. Come on, Jose. Oh, there's Carlos Correa's coming up to bat. Oh my goodness, it's just flashed 3 times. Do you know what I do? It allows me, gives me enough time to turn off the telly. I go to the kitchen, get out the cupboard, get some plates and cups out of the cupboard and put them into the sink, and I start washing them up. So she comes in and she sees that her husband, who's just been drinking beer and watching the baseball, is actually working very hard. And darling, hello. Yeah, welcome home, sweetheart. Yeah, I've just been tidying up for the last half an hour or so, just getting everything ready for you. Here I am washing up. Oh, you are wonderful. Thank you. Please stop doing that. Go and put your feet up, have a bit. So the Internet of Things has its value, ladies and gentlemen. You must never tell her this, by the way. I don't know why I'm whispering. It's quite weird recording this as well and talking to nobody when I'm recording it, but that's beside the point. So the Internet of Things, all right? So I can monitor home temperatures whilst on vacation remotely, alert drivers of parking spaces and traffic volumes, cardiac monitors alerting physicians of potential health risks, smart cities, smart homes, e-health. We see it now in the oil business as well. So data is being collected from the oil bits, drilling down to in potential oil wells, recording back in real time what's going on. So this transference of data over the internet and being able to leverage things, it is fantastic. And it has saved my butt more times than I care to admit. And that's all I'm going to say on that. The next megatrend, cloud computing. So much of the functionality of applications previously installed on your computer can now be accessed over the cloud. So cloud computing is really about sharing technology resources and taking the pain out of using and sharing data and applications. A major advantage, of course, is backup and reliability. If your computer breaks, you haven't lost your data. Also, you can access your files from any computer. For example, have you ever used Dropbox? Of course you have. I use Dropbox and Box all the time. It requires connectivity to function. So the constant connectivity we see at work and play is a key enabler. And mobile computing is all tied into it and has further added to the value of this cloud metaphor. We're going to talk about cloud computing in more detail in chapter 3, but just remember that the most important thing about cloud computing is this constant connectivity. The last thing in this section is this concept of big data. So businesses continue to gather ever more data from internal and external sources. More collected data are from both structured and unstructured sources, such as natural language postings about a business. Okay? This presents new opportunities. If you can have access to big data, if you can properly analyze it and mine it for information, you are going to be more competitive than anybody else. But the resources required to mine big data pose tremendous challenges for business. So big data is a key part of business intelligence, and we're going to talk about this in more detail in chapter 6. But we are going to have huge amounts of data by the time of 2025, 5 years' time. 180 zettabytes. Wow, that's a lot. 180 zettabytes. 180 trillion gigabytes. Crikey, rikey. I don't want to be working on that. That's going to be a nightmare to deliver. Right, so that's the first learning objective. Our second learning objective, explain what an information system is, contrasting its data, technology, people, and organizational components. As we discuss information systems, it's important to know what an information system is, and just as important to know what an information system isn't. So the learning objective of this section is for you to be able to explain what an information system is, including the components. So a key part of this is the element of data, as well as the difference between data, information, and knowledge. Now, if you were ever in my database class, we talk about this in more detail, and I think Dr. Grimes and Dr. Knighton do as well. So we are going to start by looking at data, and then we're going to look at hardware, software, and telecoms, people, and then organizations. So data, the root and purpose of information systems. So data are the raw symbols, such as characters and numbers that we capture every day. Alone, raw data are not very useful. You can see there on the left-hand side, these numbers, 465889727. In of itself, it's not very useful, okay? Once data are processed and analyzed, and by the way, data are always plural. It's never data is, it's always data are. And I make that mistake even now, and I've been playing with data now for the best part of 30 years. Data are, not data is. So once data are processed and analyzed, the data become information, okay? So you've processed and analyzed the data, you formatted it, and you can see, 465-889727. That's a social security number. Okay, very good. But it doesn't allow us to make a decision about what that is. We don't know, for instance, who that social security number becomes, okay? So data transforms into information. To make a decision, we need to understand the context of the information and the environment in which we want to use it. So knowledge is the ability to understand information, form opinions, and make decisions or predictions based on the information. So when information is understood and used for decisions, it becomes knowledge. So that's data. People. So since the first computers decades ago, an entire ecosystem has grown up surrounding the development, implementation, support, use, and maintenance of information systems. This ecosystem includes multiple types of highly skilled professionals, and expanding use means that demand continues to grow for those with advanced or unique skills. In short, you've made a great choice doing a degree in MIS. Congratulations. You know, you look at this and there's nothing, I have nothing against yoga instructors. My wife does yoga every morning before she gets to work. She does like half an hour of yoga, and that's great. She loves it. And she's had instructors come in and help her and so on and so forth. But you don't get paid very much. Can I just point out that the degree in which you get paid the most out of all the different areas in the business school is MIS. Congratulations, you made another great choice. However, did you know that if you are a member of MISO, the average salary for a MISO student who goes into full-time employment is higher than that of an MIS student? That being the case, if you're not a member of MISO, why not? You should be. And I'm going to push MISO every single class because it's great. And I'm very proud to be a member of MISO as its faculty advisor. So, but in short, you've made a very good choice. So examples of careers in information systems, you can see them here: systems analysts, program operators, network administrators, DBAs, database administrators, IS auditors. IS careers can be very rewarding financially in terms of job satisfaction. Salaries to developers range, anything starting off 80K up to 6 figures. IS manager salaries are often in 6 figures. And then you can go up to things like chief information officers, chief technology officers, chief data officers, and you're starting to talk about the big bucks. As you know, I've worked in investment banking for many years and many different technology project roles, and you can make some seriously good money. Right? You can make some seriously good money. I've made quite a lot of money in my time because of the fact that technology lies at the foundation of the whole business, irrespective of what it is. And I was dedicated and worked hard and was pretty good at it. So the fact that you are doing MIS is, I'm not joking apart, the fact that you are an MIS student is fantastic. And I congratulate you on making that choice because the opportunities open to you are second to none. It's fantastic. What is it exactly, do you think, that makes an information systems person so valuable? And it's this: you have the ability to be the central person interacting with many different types of people who cannot talk to each other. Okay, you're that person in the middle who can talk to the techies down there in the bottom left, the business guys who are there above you, and understand the systems themselves on the right there in a way that nobody else can. Okay, so you have these three things. You have technical competency, business competency, and system competency. So technical competency involves an understanding of the nuts and bolts. So IS professionals, we're not necessarily experts in the nuts and the bolts, but we know enough to be able to apply them to practical business solving. Right? We can talk as well. We can talk the language to the geeks and the nerds, to the computer scientists of the world, and we can understand what they're saying. We also have business competency. There's a reason why the MIS degree is offered in the business school and not in the School of Natural Science and Mathematics. So business competency is what separates IS professionals from mere techies. Although technical positions are often outsourced, it is much harder to outsource business savvy and knowledge. So MIS professionals, for instance, we interact with the business. We understand the business needs. We understand what the business wants, and we can communicate that to the techies because we have technical competency as well. We also have systems competency, and this is what separates good IS professionals from technicians. It involves an understanding of how technology integrates with organizations, people, and society. So, technical competency, understanding the nuts and bolts. Business competency separates IS professionals from mere techies. And systems competency, how technology integrates with organizations, people, and society. I also want to talk about organizations. You've got to remember, right, that information systems don't exist in a vacuum. They exist in the context of varying types of organizations. And we are all only interested in this course about organizational context. We're not talking about stuff at home. We're talking about the role of information systems in the organizations. So information systems play multiple roles in organizations, ranging from automating business processes, driving down costs, to reaching new customers and better servicing existing ones. The organization of information systems has changed over the years. In the past, information systems was controlled in a central location, composed of technical experts, but more and more we see that the IS function is distributed across the organization as people become more tech savvy, and there's a greater understanding of the need to adjust information systems to the needs of different functional units. It's interesting to note that things like the chief information officer and the chief technical officer, these days, they're not, on average, not always a technical person. Yeah. So this is interesting, right? So the context of information systems in the organization, you can see here on the screen: be more productive and profitable, gain a competitive advantage, read more customers, improve customer service. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you are a church, a university, President Trump, you're making widgets, you're a military force, technology still, information systems still provides you with that information. Last in this area, this objective, we're going to just acknowledge that there are different categories of information systems. This table 1.5 gives you these different categories. You can see some of these. And what I'd like you to do, if you don't know any of these, you go away and just go online and find out what is meant by, I don't know, electronic commerce system or an office automation system and so on and so forth. You'll know some of them you won't know. A decision support system helps you as a manager to make a decision for your organization. Okay, for instance, geographic information system helps you to decide where to locate a restaurant, for instance. We'll talk about that later on as well. So we move into our penultimate learning objective, which is describe the dual nature of information systems in the success and failure of modern organizations. Okay, so information systems hold great promise for organizations, but they also provide and pose significant risks. So the learning objective for this section is for you to be able to describe the dual nature of information systems, how they may help, and actually how they may harm. Right. I'm going to give you 3 examples of information systems here that have gone awry. From a little time ago, but here's an example, first of all. IS gone awry, outages, outrage gamers. Goodness gracious, I would not have wanted to be a parent on Christmas Day 2014. But anyway, 2011, PlayStation. Some of you like playing PlayStation? I've never been able to get into PlayStation. I used to play games back in the 1980s. Now, what did I have? I had a ZX or ZX Spectrum, which I don't think you guys even had in America. Oh my goodness, it was wonderful. Anyway, PlayStation system outage last 21 days. Just imagine all those families and the PlayStations around the world that have been purchased cannot use. Christmas Day 2014, denial of service attack caused PlayStation Network to be unavailable. Oh, crikey, just imagine the reputation of the organization that owns PlayStation. Not good. You know, conversely, when things are done right, you never ever hear about any problems. When was the last time you heard about FedEx having a technology problem? You never have done, because they are amazing and getting everything right and also covering up when things go wrong. All right, so when they do things right, then it's just great. The most important, and this is a key point, which I'm going to ask you just to remember for the rest of your life, all right? Because it's relevant to you as well as organizations. The most important thing for an organization, it's not its revenue, it's not its profit, it's not its employees. The most important thing for an organization is its reputation. A reputation precedes everything. If you have a great reputation, then people are going to want to do business with you. If you have a bad reputation, then people are not going to want to do business with you. If you personally have a great reputation for being a great guy or a great girl versus being a bad person, you can see and understand the impact. So FedEx, here we have, delivers millions of pounds of freight to 220 countries, continuously updates its system, handles 50 million tracking requests every day, and you never hear of any problems. Okay? So like FedEx, many organizations leverage information systems to do businesses more effectively and efficiently, to do business, sorry. This may simply improve the bottom line, the financial revenues, or it may give a significant business advantages to organizations and allow them to have an edge over their competitors. This type of leverage can be applied by organizations of all sizes and industries. Did you know, for instance, that FedEx, just going back to FedEx, they re-engineer and improve their performance as a result of their information systems twice a year, and yet you never hear of any outages because they take it so seriously. And so we go into our last learning objective, which is describing and talking about computer ethics. Computer ethics. IS ethics are actually very important, and we necessarily focus a lot on this in this class because too often it's taken for granted. Okay, these IS ethics are a critical part of managing information systems. Okay. The learning objective for this section is for you to be able to discuss the ethical concerns of information systems in general, and particularly with respect to privacy and intellectual property. Okay, so let's talk about computer ethics. The definition of computer ethics, you can see it there, describes the moral issues and standards of conduct as they pertain to the use of information systems. So there's a growing concern in society about computer ethics, which is driven in part by growing concerns regarding individual privacy and how organizations will use the information they have, lacking any code of conduct or effective regulation. For instance, I don't know about you, but I wear a Fitbit quite a lot. I'm always trying to lose weight. Professor Skinner is fat. Let's just get it out there. I'm fat. I know I'm fat. My wife is a doctor. She constantly tells me I'm fat. I'm fat. I'm always trying to lose weight. I have a Fitbit so I can do my 10,000 steps a day and measure my swimming and blah, 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 blah. Do you think it would be ethical for Fitbit to sell my data to my health insurer, who is Blue Cross Blue Shield? And so Blue Cross Blue Shield can see what activities I'm doing. And those days, well, let's say I go a month where I don't hit a certain number of steps, that they charge me more so that they are better insured against me falling sick because I'm putting on more weight. You see what I'm saying, right? This data, the privacy, is very, very important part and one of much concern. I'll tell you, I had a job, I think I mentioned it, I may have mentioned it in one of my classes, when I was working at Merrill Lynch back in the day, early, I think it was 1998, 1999, where I basically ran all the technology for a trading desk. And this was a risk trading desk. It was a great job. And I got on very well with all the traders. There were lots of them, about 20. And I got on with the head of the trading desk and the big boss and so on and so forth. And one day he approached me and he said, Richard, I want you to go through everybody's files and find out if there's anything there that should not be there from a personal perspective. All right. And I did, because I had all the technological ability, permissions to go wherever I wanted. And I found some very dodgy things, and some people lost their jobs as a result of what I found. Now, I was able to snoop into everybody's folders. Was that appropriate? Was it appropriate for the bank and that trading desk to find out things that could harm them before they did and deal with them so that their reputation was not impacted? Or was it unethical? And if we were in a live cast situation now, we would talk about this and it would be great, but we're not, unfortunately. I want you just to think about that. Was that an ethical thing that I was asked to do? I myself personally think it was unethical, but of course I was a junior technical engineer and I had no way of standing up to a managing director at the time and saying, no, I can't do that because I've lost my job. Anyway, Richard Mason, very famous MIS professor. I met him about 8 years ago. He's ancient now, but back in 1986, he wrote a classic article describing emerging concerns in 4 key areas, which is referred to by this acronym PAPA: privacy, accuracy, property, and accessibility. Let's see what these quickly, read these through on the screen, what these are. So privacy, what information an individual should have to reveal to others in the workplace or through some transactions. Accuracy, are individuals able to access to data collected about them, check for accuracy and request correction of inaccuracies? That's a hot topic, isn't it? You see that especially on social media. Property, company that maintains databases kept on individuals and can sell the information as long as it doesn't violate stated privacy policies when gathering the data. And then accessibility, company needs to ensure proper hiring, training, and supervision of employees who have access to the data and implement the necessary software and hardware security safeguards. That accessibility. Was my access in that previous job, did I have the hiring, the training, and given the proper supervision? Of course not. Let's look at privacy and property in a little bit more detail. Companies operating in the online world are not required by law to respect your privacy. So in other words, a vendor can track what pages you look at, what products you examine in detail, which products you choose to buy, what method of payment you choose to use, and where you have the product delivered. After collecting all that information, unscrupulous vendors can sell it to others, resulting in more direct mail advertising, electronic spam in your email inbox, or calls from telemarketers. Is that ethical? Do we have any real privacy rights? That top thing. The company that maintains the database of customers is free to sell the information they have about you within limits, but they still can. Legally, there's no right to email privacy. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you 2 tips here. Please, 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 just take my word for it. Do these 2 things when you leave U of H and you go into business. Firstly, never put down in an email anything that can be construed in such a way that will get you into trouble. If you need to communicate something, do it face to face, but don't allow yourself to be tracked via email for something that could come back to bite you. Second tip, keep every single email that you send and receive for as long as you can. Organizations pride themselves on saying, yeah, we don't have a blame culture, we don't blame you, we don't blame anybody. And I can tell you now, that's a crock of rubbish. Every single organization that I've ever worked for has a blame culture. Because when the bad times come, they need to get rid of people. Who can they get rid of? The people who can be blamed. You need to keep all your emails so you can say, oh, no, it wasn't my fault. I let that person know, and here's the proof. You need to have proof. That's another little tangent. But please, ladies and gentlemen, keep every single email just so that you can't be blamed for a problem, because I'll tell you now, there will always be people trying to offload problems onto you and say that you're the problem. We have this thing called the database of intentions, okay? So the database of intentions basically is allows you to combine survey data, transaction data. You can piece them all together and you can create a highly accurate profile about what people want, what people purchase, what people like, what people are interested in, and what people are doing. Where they are, whom they know. Did anybody ever hear about this example? And this is a terrible example about Target and how what they did back in it was about 8 years ago. Now, one day, a father at home of a young teenage daughter, I don't know, maybe about mid-teens, they got some posts delivered to his house, and it was for his daughter from Target, outlining baby clothes and things for a new mother, and cots and so on and so forth. And he was outraged. He thought it was highly inappropriate for Target to be sending this kind of stings to a teenage girl. Fair enough. So he contacted Target and complained. And they apologized profusely, and they said they would look at their algorithm and find out what was going on. And it transpired that an algorithm had been written by a statistician working for Target, whereby if somebody who comes to Target buys, I think it's 23 products together, it means that they are pregnant. And if it's a young lady and you're a member of the Target membership rewards thing, they can work out whether you're pregnant or not. So the father, it transpired that the daughter was indeed pregnant, and the way he found out was through Target sending a catalog of baby things to the daughter. And Target apologized profusely when it transpired that the father came back and said, oh my goodness, my daughter is pregnant at the age of 15, and you were right. Because obviously that's their technology allowed them to make them realize this was the case from this database of intentions. But was that appropriate? Of course not. So they had to change their algorithms. So it becomes easier to collect and analyze various types of data about people and then take advantage of it. But then you raise these concerns about privacy. Is collecting all this data appropriate? And in the case of Target, probably not. One of the last few things I just want to touch on is intellectual property. Intellectual property is creating new ethical challenges as digital media can be copied endlessly with no loss of quality. Back in the day, the only way I could copy music was put one of these old tapes in the cassette player and copy off the radio, and it was rubbish, but that's all we had, and it was fantastic. Nowadays it's all digital, right? And you can get access to data and music and intellectual property very, very easily. However, many of the individuals who create intellectual property have a legal right to be the sole source for sales and are compensated for their creative work by receiving payment for each copy sold. So this creates an ethical dilemma for individuals who own copies of the work and feel they should be able to use it as they see fit, including the duplication of it for a friend. So, you know, in some cultures, it's a sign of praise for the creator when somebody copies the work and shares it with other people. You know, your work is great. I want to share it with as many people as possible, and irrespective of whether you get money out of it or not. Another set of ethical issues centers around intellectual property in the context of downloading as well, which is kind of related to this. Downloading, getting access to in an illegal fashion as well. You tie that all together and you can see that intellectual property is, from an ethical perspective, one of those areas we need to be aware of. So we kind of see all of this, that there's lots of problems, okay? Therefore, people argue that there is a need for a code of ethical conduct, and indeed, a code has been created. Okay, this Computer Ethics Institute, these guys refer, educate, and provide policy studies. This is their type of organization, and they provided these ethical guidelines for computer use. This kind of, the guidelines prohibit, you can see all the stuff on the screen, using a computer to harm others, interfering in other computers' work, snooping other people's files, using a computer to steal, and so on and so forth. Okay. So a standard code of conduct removes ambiguity when situations come up that aren't necessarily legal, but that have the potential to cause individuals or in organizations significant harm. This is particularly true where regulations regarding the use of information systems are playing catch-up to the existing capabilities, such as editing a photo so it appears to represent something that wasn't in the original. The Computer Ethics Institute has created a widely quoted set of guidelines. Okay, and you can see them here. And we see them here as well. The problem is they're guidelines. They're not rules. These are things we should do. So should guidelines be in place to dictate how businesses and other people use information and computers? I think so, because I think that's the easiest way to protect everybody and so on and so forth. The fact that the guidelines have not been put into law yet is a concern, and I don't think they're going to happen anytime soon. Okay, ladies and gents, so that's the end of this first chapter. Thank you very much for listening in. I apologize for the tangents, but you get used to them. We always have them in my classes, and they can add a little bit of color to the subject that might be a little bit dry otherwise. Right, so let's have a look at what we talked about. So we talked about the characteristics of the digital world, some of the societal issues, the mega trends. We talked about what an information system is. We talked about data, technology, people, and organizational components. We talked about the dual nature of information systems, when things go well and when things go awry. And at the end, we've talked about computer ethics. Let's have a look at your homework. Okay, so if you're in group 1 and if you're in group 5, go to page 44 of the textbook and you'll see a case study there called Apple. I want you to review that case study, and for your written assignment, I want you to answer questions I-41 and I-42. Group 3 and Group 2, you have Case 2, Healthcare IS, on page 45. Answer questions I-44 and I-45. And then Group 4 and 6, you have the ethical dilemma, the social and environmental costs of the newest gadgets, on page 31 of the textbook. Answer questions 1 and 2. Now, for your groups, you're pretty large groups, right? You're 7 or 8 people per group. So I'm expecting a really decent, in-depth, pretty lengthy answer to these questions, right? Look at the case study, think about what that case study is saying, think about what you've read in the textbook for the chapter, because I'm expecting you to read the chapter as well. Think about this, what you've listened on this video recording, and then answer those questions. And so your group assignment for each of those groups is to answer the questions for your case studies. Now, not only are you going to do that, you're also going to do a presentation like we spoke about in the first class. And the presentation is going to be comprised of you sharing with the class what the case study is all about. So group 1 and group 5, when you're doing a presentation, you're going to share not only your answers to the questions of I-41 and I-42, but you're also going to talk about what the case study is all about. So you're all going to do that for your presentation. And you're also going to come up with a couple of critical questions related to your case that you weren't asked, but you want to lead the class in a discussion about. So for instance, groups 3 and group 2, you're going to come up with a couple of questions that you're going to ask the class about, referring to the healthcare IS case study that you've studied, all right? So it should be relevant to the subject. And when you ask these questions, you're going to be expected to get the answers out of people in the audience. So you've got to know not just what the questions are and just ask the questions and then stand back. You also need to get involved with the answers. I want to see backwards and forwards for the 5 minutes or so that we have that conversation ongoing. And then the same for 4 and 6. So come the next class, group 1 and group 5, one of you will be presenting on the case study and the 2 questions, and the other one of you will be leading the class in the critical discussions on Apple, the case study. And the same for group 3 and group 2, and the same for group 4 and group 6. Okay, if you've got any questions, please reach out to me. As I say, I'll be in the Zoom class on the Wednesday if you want to talk about anything. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening. I hope you found it not too bad. My dulcet tones talking to you whilst we go through the slides. I'm off for a drink because I need a drink, having spoken continuously for over an hour. And I look forward to catching up with you, if not before, on Monday. All right, thanks so much. Take care and stay safe.